this video, I'm going to read everything from these sheets of paper that I have in my hands. That will probably bore you, but I don't care. When you use notes like that in your speech, that's essentially what you're saying to the audience. I don't care if you're bored. No one shows up to listen to someone read their speech from a sheet of paper. That's not a speech. So why would someone be happy if they showed up and you read to them from a sheet of paper? Your goal when using notes is to not use them at all. Now that doesn't mean you can't use notes or shouldn't use notes during your speech, but your goal is always to prepare enough so that you don't need the notes.
The Bauma comet goes on these roller coaster-like maneuvers called parabolas. They go up at a 45-degree angle, over the top, which is where you'll experience zero gravity, and then back down again at a 45-degree angle.
As you saw in that clip, Sarah let the notes become obtrusive. Although her notes were the right size, they were very small, they still got in the way of her making eye contact with the audience because, one, she relied on them too heavily, and two, it got in the way of her hand gestures because she gripped the cards with both hands. It's best to have small note card and to incorporate it into your gestures so that the audience doesn't even notice that it's there, like I'm doing right now. The only time you should use your notes is for things like direct quotes or for statistics that might be hard to remember. Otherwise, your goal in a speech is to never use your notes and never need your notes. Now, that doesn't mean you can never use them. You should have them with you just in case. And it's also okay to take your notes and set them down on a table or a chair while you're speaking and then walk over and pick them up if you need them. That's good because that keeps your hands free for gesturing. And that's your goal. Additionally, when you're giving a speech, you might also have a PowerPoint remote that you need to occupy your hands with from time to time. My advice is to be sure to keep these two things apart for gesturing. Don't fidget with them and don't let your hands become preoccupied. Set these things down when you're not using them so that you can gesture naturally. I mentioned this before in the video about how to practice your speech. You should always start with a lot of material and whittle your way down as you practice and get to know your speech better. So you could start with your outline, and then as you don't need that, get rid of that and switch over to note cards, maybe some larger note cards, then switch off to some smaller note cards. Your goal should be to get to a point where you don't need any note cards. But maybe you want to have one card for a longer speech, like an informative or a persuasive speech. That's fine. But also keep in mind that you want to get to the point where you've practiced several times only using this one note card. So don't just stop when you have all these notes and you think you have your speech memorized. Keep on going to where you're practicing so it's like a dress rehearsal for your speech. And if you're going to use the PowerPoint remote during your speech, use that too when you practice, or just use something that's about the same size in your hand so that you can get used to gesturing with these things in your hand and get used to maybe putting them in your pockets or taking them out or setting them down while you're speaking. One other practice tip is when you're practicing your speech, whether you're using a note card or not, don't let your hands touch the note card at the same time ever. Don't let your hands touch each other ever when you're practicing. Now, of course, during your speech, if you do this for a couple seconds during your speech or your hands touch while you're giving your speech, that's okay. But when we practice something, we sometimes exaggerate something so that we do it very little during our speech. And that goes for holding the note card with both hands. Practice never touching the note card with two hands. That way, you're free to use gestures instead. To summarize the main points of this video, 1. Never read your speech from notes, a piece of paper, anything. The audience didn't show up to hear someone read to them. They showed up to hear you give a speech. 2. Your goal should be to never use notes at all during your speech. You may use notes, but your goal when you practice is to get to the point to where you don't need them. And 3, when you must use notes, Use note cards that are small, say 3 by 5, so that they're completely unobtrusive to your gesturing and your presentation.